Today I'm going to show you how you can automatically add metadata to many Datadog software catalog entities at once using Terraform. To demonstrate this, I have 40 services in my software catalog without any metadata. No source code repos, contact information, or any way to tell at glance who owns them. In other words, I have entities in my catalog, but none of the context that makes them useful. Enriching them by hand would be easy enough in the UI, but picture an account with data from hundreds of teams, and that becomes a long, tedious process. I'm going to use a Terraform script to automate that process. I'm going to add GitHub repos, Slack channels, and team ownership, which is going to pay off in a big way. Assigning ownership means these services will appear in the Datadog team's pages of the engineers who are responsible for them. Before I dig into the code, my first step is setting up the Terraform provider from Datadog. This lets me create and programmatically manage Datadog resources such as software catalog entities and Datadog teams. In my Datadog account, I go to Organization Settings, API Keys. For automation like this, it's a best practice to generate a dedicated API key rather than using an existing one. I create a new key specifically for Terraform and add its values to the terraform.tf-vars file. I repeat the same process for the application key by going to Organization Settings, Application Keys. I generate a new key and add it to the terraforms.tf-vars file. I created a CSV file that serves as a reference table for the metadata I want to add to the software catalog entities. In this case, I'm adding the following metadata to the entities through two different YAML files: team, repo, Slack channel contact information. The 40 entities listed on my CSV are the ones currently missing team ownership. For each entity, I list the team that owns it, if it's SRE or engineering, and map the team value to its corresponding future YAML file. YAML number 1 for SRE and YAML number 2 for engineering. Not every entity needs to receive equal metadata. If a field in the CSV is left blank, the script will simply skip it. Another thing to note is that certain fields and metadata components that are specific to a service, such as service description, language, or the display name, will be skipped by the Terraform script, even if they are defined in the reference YAMLs. Since it can be easy to forget to remove them from the reference YAML, I did this so that the services display names do not become the same on the entire platform. Next, I set up the two baseline YAML files for my Terraform automation. YAML number 1 will have the SRE team metadata. YAML number 2 will have the engineering team metadata. In Datadog, I open the command menu with Command K, search for software, and select Services, Software Catalog. From the Software Catalog page, I select an entity to use as a baseline. In the Entities side panel, I click on Service Page and then Service Config. I click Edit and add the team metadata. In this case, I'm adding information for the SRE team. I set the SRE team as the owner, add the SRE Slack channel in contacts, and add the SRE GitHub repo code location. I scroll back to the top of the page and switch from the UI editor to the YAML editor. I copy the YAML into a text editor and save it as software catalog 1 YAML, since that's the file name in my CSV reference for the SRE team. I click Save Entry and repeat the same process for the engineering team. After saving the metadata for the engineering team's entities as software catalog 2.yaml, I now have 2 YAML files, one per team, mapped in my CSV reference table. I add both YAML files to the Files directory, and I'm ready to run the Terraform deployment. Here's the YAML for the SRE team, and here's the YAML for the engineering team. Now that I have the prerequisites set up, I'm ready to move on to the Terraform solution. Here, I'm using a basic Terraform project structure. In the root directory, I have the files folder containing the CSV and the 2 YAML files. The standard Terraform files, including the provider.tf, which declares the Datadog provider, along with the native HashiCorp HTTP and local providers. Additionally, I set the site URL as US1 in this case, and the API and application keys as variables needed for the Datadog provider to connect to my account. These are the other variables defined in the vars.tf file. Because the API and application keys are sensitive, I store their values in the terraform.tf vars file. The vars.tf declares the variables, and terraform.tf vars provides their actual values. I included an example of what this looks like. Just make sure the values remain inside the quotes. In this example, the automation logic lives in the main.tf file. First, the script fetches the current software catalog metadata from my Datadog account using the native Terraform HTTP provider. Then it creates a JSON snapshot of the current state using the local exec provisioner. This gives me a before and after reference in case I need to compare changes later. Next, the script uses locals to compare the fetch entities with the YAML templates defined during setup. It reads the CSV mappings and compares them against the available services in my account. Then, for each service in software catalog, it reads the mapped YAML file from the CSV and applies any missing metadata. This allows me to apply shared metadata across all my software catalog entities, while keeping intact service-specific information such as ID, name, kind, display name, language, and the entity description. Without these exclusions, service-specific fields like descriptions could be overwritten. The metadata is then merged, following those exclusions. The goal is to add what's missing without modifying anything that should not be modified. In my example, I also included another guardrail using prevent_destroy equals true lifecycle flag. which shows an error message to prevent accidental destruction of the managed metadata unless that flag is intentionally changed. Once everything is applied, the script generates a JSON file containing the result of the merged software catalog entities. This captures the update state for reference or troubleshooting. And here I am showing the JSON diff of the output done by the merging of the software catalog entities. How things were before and how things are after the Terraform automation. This JSON diff captures the updated state for reference or troubleshooting. I can also confirm the merged entities using the Terraform state list command. As a result of running Terraform apply, I can now see all entities in software catalog have team ownership along with their Slack channel and GitHub repository information. Here's how it looks in the software catalog. If I click on Organization Settings and Teams, I can see that both teams have services associated with them. Clicking on each team page shows a clean list of all the services owned by that team. Now, when someone from the SRE team logs into Datadog, they can go to their team page and see the services they own alongside their monitors, incidents, and other assets. Thank you for watching, and I hope that you enjoy adding metadata to your software catalog entities as much as I did. There's so much you can add to software catalog entities, so be sure to check out the software catalog documentation. I'll include the links to that and other useful resources in this video's description.